We are live at Dog is Good again, Wednesday afternoon, and boy, am I honored and excited to talk to Dr. Ernie Ward today, and I hope you will be excited too, because we have some important stuff to cover for you and for the health of your pet. And speaking of pets, Bolo just woke up from her nap, so she is working circles around my desk, trying to put her ball into my lap. So you might see an occasional ball throw throughout the during the interview. But I want to have people, as you pop on board, please share with your friends. Please invite them to watch live. Certainly for those of you who are watching the replay, we ask you to share it as well. Especially this time of year as we get ready to go into the holidays, there is a lot to think about. We have Thanksgiving coming up. Super thankful for that holiday. It's my favorite holiday of the year. Hello from Washington. Hi, Stephen. And Tati, I hope I'm saying your name right. I used to live in Springfield, Virginia. So welcome. And yes, as you are popping in, please share where you are from, because that always helps us know where everybody is at. So for those of you who are first coming on board and who may not know me, I am Gila Kurtz. I am one of the co-founders of Dog is Good. And sorry, that just got distracted. Bola just dropped my phone. It's a little chaos here in my room all of a sudden, but it's live, so we're going to go with it. So, and what I wanted to invite you to is we have a lot of really cool things that go on here at Dog is Good. Hi from Georgia. We have a lifestyle group that is a private group, and I want to invite you to join that, because we will be announcing the winner of our giveaway in that group. And so if you are just jumping, hi Brittany, thank you for joining from Idaho. I love that everybody can come from all over the country and watch us live and learn some new things and share with your friends. Tell them to get on board. So what is the giveaway today? Since we are talking health and fitness, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and I think Dr. Ward's as well, is you are up for the Never Walk Alone hoodie. It's not where you walk, it's who walks with you. And how true is that in life? Wherever you go, it doesn't matter where you go, just so long as you have the right people and the right pets around you to do it. So you have a chance to win that, and for your dog, our Never Walk Alone dog water bottle. So really good gift. So we will pop in the link where you can enter to win those, and we will announce the winner in the private Facebook group. Also in the private Facebook group, if you guys missed it, you missed a great party that we did last week live online. So stay tuned. It could happen again, but you have to be part of that group to know about it. So please join that. And then the last thing I want to invite you to is the Fur Covered Wisdom. You can go to our website, dogisgood.com, and sign up to receive a note of inspiration that comes to you every week from your dog personally. How awesome is that? Your dog knows it all, truly, and they will provide you with something great to think about as to how you should, food for thought for the week ahead. And isn't that, there was no pun intended there, since we'll be talking about pet obesity today. So yes, I am ready to introduce our guest to you. And again, I want to give you an opportunity to start to share, because we're going to be talking about a really important topic, and that is pet obesity and maintaining a healthy lifestyle, ideally for your pet, but also for you as well, because I think the two are quite integrated. So I want to take a moment to introduce you and give you some background for those of you who do not know him. Dr. Ernie Ward spent his entire career practicing, writing about, and teaching and encouraging better care for animals, and he has earned the title of America's Pet Advocate as a result of that. Whether he's discussing the dangers of obesity, how to perform a physical exam, dealing with behavioral issues, answering pet owners' questions about nutrition or surgery, or innovating better care for aging pets, Dr. Ward's unifying theme is do what's in the pet's interest. And don't we all feel that way? So excited to learn more about that. But for over 20 years, he has pursued a higher quality of life for himself, his family, and the pets that he serves. Refuses to accept that the veterinary practice is limited to diagnosing and treating disease, but chooses to focus on preventing disease and optimizing health. Let's see. So the journey has led him to become a student of human and veterinary physiology, nutrition, wellness, and longevity. Curing illness and restoring well-being must be a combination of medical and surgical interventions, nutritional and emotional counseling, and holistic support. He is a practitioner of the be it, do it, share it philosophy. And according to Dr. Ward, the most important reasons for living are the relationships we cultivate with ourselves, each other, our planet, and pet loved ones. By the way, that is an awesome quote. I love that. Absolutely love that. So welcome and thank you so much for taking time out. I know how busy you are because what those of you out there watching do not know is he just returned from Barcelona, Spain. Dr. Ward serves the veterinary community as well as his clients and the pets that he serves by also speaking all over the country, all over the world. So I appreciate you taking time out. Thank you.
Oh, Gila, it's my pleasure. I'm delighted to be here today.
Well, and I'm also excited. You know, he also just got back from a run. So the guy walks his walk and walks his talk, runs his talk, whatever, in terms of maintaining health and wellness for himself and the people around him and the pets around him. So let's just dive right in on our topic, pet obesity. And I'm going to, you guys, you did not get to see prior to us going live, but I had him kind of take a quick peek at my little chunker Bolo because I know she has a teeny bit of a weight issue. I don't know how big a weight issue it is, but I think it's, you know, it's something that we have to address, and I'm totally aware of it. And yet I don't understand why. And we're going to ask some questions about that a little bit later, and hopefully the answers might help you in your search for knowing how to better manage your pet's weight and their health overall. But, you know, here we are in the season prior to Thanksgiving, and this is the time of year where everybody's thinking about food. They're, you know, historically, we all know that between now and New Year's, what is the average weight gain? About 7 pounds for humans? Is that right?
Well, maybe a little less than that, but
okay.
2 to 3 pounds certainly during the holiday season for most people.
Oh, okay. I thought by New Year's it was almost 7. So, okay, 2 to 3. Well, nonetheless, there's weight gain, and there's a lot of reasons why. But it's interesting because there is a correlation that also seems to happen with our pets. And you actually did a study on that. I'd love for you to just kind of share some of that background research and what you discovered.
Yeah, it's true. The holiday weight gain for pets is very similar to people. And I do have one little caveat. This was a small little study, a pilot study that we did back in 2006, and we followed a cohort of dogs and cats. So if memory serves me correctly, maybe about 30, 35 dogs and maybe about 16 to 20 cats. And what we found was that from the period of Halloween to New Year's, that those dogs gained about 1 to 1.5% of their total body weight. So that's equal to about a person gaining that 2 to 4 pounds that we always hear about the holiday spread. Cats fared better. And I think that's typically because we don't share the same kinds of holiday foods with cats that we do with dogs. You know, dogs, it's like, hey, do you want some pie? Here you go. Ice cream, good. Whereas cats, you know, being carnivorous, typically are going for the chicken and the poultry and so forth. So cats did not have as significant a weight gain, but again, we start to see that. And primarily, honestly, one of the conclusions we had from this study was that perhaps it was reduced activity levels of cats during that period that actually contributed to their weight. But regardless, when you are planning your Thanksgiving spread next week, be sure to include your pet, because I want to spread joy to all those that I love. So that includes my dogs and cats. So sort of when you're planning your meals, say, what could I share with my dog that would be safe, lower calorie, and maybe high in nutritional value. So for dogs, share your meat. So if you're going to have fish or poultry or turkey or whatever it is, that's okay in moderate small quantities, but share the meat. You know, avoid the breads, the starches, the sweets, and of course pile on the veggies. I mean, just do that. And for your kitty cat, you know, a flake of chicken, a flake of turkey, put that in the bowl. Again, that just allows them to share into the celebration.
Okay, awesome. Interesting too. And I want to say that there's a lot of questions coming in. So everybody, please do pop those questions in. I will make sure that I ask them. And can you see them also? But I'll make sure that we get those questions answered. One thing I did have as it relates to Thanksgiving, is there anything that we should be very careful of or concerned about that could be toxic or problematic for the pet?
Yeah, in fact, I just sent in my whoops, that's me. Is that coming through?
I heard a buzz, but like this is live. Everybody knows it's live.
Okay.
We get a little bit more slack. I hope.
Right.
Thank you, people.
There we go. So I just finished a newspaper article on this. I write a couple of newspaper articles, and I'll tell you, there's really three big things I want everybody. Well, maybe four, but we'll add the fourth as a bonus. Of course, the big thing is bones. You're going to be probably cooking that big turkey, and so regardless of what you may hear or read, it's just not worth the risk to share bones with your dog at Thanksgiving. I mean, that's one of the number one things we see in our clinics. Certainly, emergency veterinary hospitals are populated with dogs who have bone ingestion. I mean, it can damage their mouth, it can break a tooth, it can cause obstructions. I mean, skip the bones. The second thing, of course, is always going to be alcohol. And that's something, that maybe people don't think of as often. But what happens is inevitably you have Uncle Bob who is watching the football game with a brew in his hand, and he kind of passes out, from all the tryptophan. And then a curious dog or cat comes by, and it can take as little as an ounce of liquor or alcohol to be toxic and lethal to a cat. So be really, really careful with the booze around Thanksgiving and the holidays in general. We typically see this more around New Year's. We see alcohol intoxication of dogs and cats. The third thing, of course, is chocolate. I don't think I have to keep going into chocolate toxicity, but obviously the darker cooking chocolates, baking chocolates rather, are much more toxic. They have a component called theobromine, and it can actually lead to seizures and even irregular heartbeats. So skip the chocolates whenever possible. And then the fourth one is something that we're seeing more and more of, and that's a sweetener called xylitol. And you see this like in sugar-free products. But people are starting to see it in baked goods. If you see xylitol, keep it away from your dogs. Cats seem to tolerate it a little better. But if your dog gets into the gum with xylitol or you're baking with xylitol, whatever, it is very toxic. It causes a sudden drop in blood sugar. And if you're not around, if you're not able to get quickly to the veterinarian, I mean, this can be lethal.
Oh gosh. Okay, so I put it in the comments, you guys. Definitely beware. And that means too, just as a tidbit for anybody who has a dog that may or may not go into your purse on occasion. I don't know any dog that does that, but don't keep your gum in there if you chew gum.
And Gila, the mints, there's so many like breath mints that use xylitol as a sweetener. So, we're starting to see that as more of a problem. The sad news is when it's a problem, it's a significant problem. I'm sure there are some dogs that do okay, and just don't eat enough to cause toxicity. Cats, for whatever reason, seem to be a little more tolerant of xylitol, so we don't see that precipitous drop in blood sugar. But again, if it says xylitol on there, you're using a sugar-free type of product, really keep it away from your pets.
Okay, great advice. And I'm going to circle back to this a little later because I'd like to know if there's any quick, not that the dog should not go to vet. I know that they need to go right away, or cat, but if there's something that they could be doing that could help the process prior to getting there, I want you to be able to cover that and let us know. So one of the things that I found interesting, being in the pet space, what I've seen over the past 10 years is such a shift in how we view our pets. We always like to describe how they've gone from the backyard and into the bedroom and now wherever we go. And yet this humanization seems to be occurring also as it relates to wellness and nutrition. So I'm seeing on the market a lot more products that are supposed to help in terms of gut health and overall wellness. What are you seeing, and what are your thoughts on that?
Right, and you're right, Gila. The humanization trend just seems to have no stopping point over the past decade. I mean, you've seen this go from the cutesy dressing up your dog to now let's talk about probiotics, for your pet.
Yeah.
And this is an important trend because as the emphasis has been shifting away from the dress them up and more to the make them healthier, we've started to see better products in the marketplace. Along with that, of course, we've seen a lot of things that just there's no evidence that they do help. So I'd encourage you to have a dialogue with your veterinarian before you just reach for that latest thing you saw on the internet, because some of the stuff's just, quite frankly, a waste of money. But I like the humanization trend in general because, as someone who's dedicated their entire life to caring for animals, I want them to be treated more humanely. And so as we elevate certain species, particularly dogs and cats in the context of your company in this conversation, there is a trickle down translation. And so it makes us more aware of how are all animals on the planet treated. And so, one of my biggest concerns, again, is, and I'm a vegetarian, but, if we're going to eat animals, I want to make sure that at least they are cared for humanely. So I kind of see this humanization trend as benefiting that as well. And so I like that. But I think where the real impact is starting to be seen in the veterinary world is the fact that we're getting better diagnostic tests, we're getting better medications, we're getting better imaging. I mean, it's like almost everything you have in the human hospital, we now are pretty close to having in the veterinary world. So it's very, very exciting. In 25 years of practice, I've never seen this acceleration that I've witnessed over the past 5 years. And again, it's just a confluence of, people's attitudes, as you're saying, shifting, technology maturing, and of course, prices have come down. I mean, obviously, we always wish they would come down more from a consumer standpoint, but the reality is we have access in the veterinary world to, for example, CT and MRI that, when I was one of the 10 veterinarians, we put a CT and MRI at NC State University Veterinary School, and that was nearly 15 years ago. So 10 of us got together, put in some money. We had another company that came in, and the MRIs at that time, 15 years ago, were costing $1,500 to $2,000. Today, those MRIs are no different. I mean, there's been no inflation in price, which means it's more accessible to people than ever before. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, with a focus on wellness and all the technology and awareness available to us today, that we can see our pets live longer, better quality lives too. Because I know we never want to think about having to say goodbye. So if you can also spend some time towards the end too, talking about the different steps that we can take to improve the longevity. So pet obesity, that is just like it is in the US. I feel like it's almost epidemic. I read where 1 in 3 people is actually overweight, and 2 in 3 people are overweight. 1 in every 3 people is actually obese. So what are you seeing as far as the pets? Is it epidemic levels in terms of obesity and
right?
Pets being overweight?
And again, just from a nomenclature standpoint, we don't typically use the term epidemic because this isn't a contagious condition.
Right. Okay. Right.
It's a disease state. But and it's just a small point. But we're also trying to make sure that the language that we use around obesity is representative of the true issue, which is a disease state. So so it's a fair point, but just something from a scientific standpoint, I always want to point out.
Sure.
When I founded the Association for Pet Obesity Prevention in 2005, I did this really for 2 primary reasons. One, I wanted to see what the prevalence was. Like, we saw a few little surveys and studies here and there, many of them in referral institutions, at universities. And so I didn't think that was necessarily representative of the pets that we see every day, the ones that you have in your office and home. And so I wanted to measure the prevalence. So that was one of the first goals of the association. The second was to raise awareness because, quite frankly, my professional colleagues weren't taking it seriously. I was witnessing in my own clinic, more and more obese pets. and nobody seemed to be alarmed by this. And, I was at that same time, getting very involved in ultra endurance events, whether it was Ironman or whatever, so I was taking this journey as a personal trainer on the human side, as a triathlon coach for humans. And suddenly I was going, why aren't we talking about this? So raising awareness, measuring prevalence in 2005. And what we've seen is, people always say, oh, why isn't it, going skyrocketing upwards? It's not. It shouldn't. The human obesity, I mean, we kind of have this, we know where it is. It kind of seems to be fairly stable. It creeps up. But within our data, we have seen a trend that I find more disturbing than the actual overall number. So when people say, it's 54% of dogs and 59% of cats, that was this past year's survey results, I'm concerned. But what I'm more concerned with is within those numbers, how many of these pets are now what we call, super obese. So what we're seeing is that when you're classified as obese, that begins at about, and we don't have clear definitions, which is something I'm fighting for within the profession, but it's typically accepted to be about 30% above ideal body weight. So there's a thing called a body condition score, and there's different ways to estimate it. But so they're in the obese category. And what we're finding is they're not right at the cutoff of overweight and obese. They are far on the fringes. They're way outside. So, I was talking to a colleague of mine recently when I was presenting, and I was like, think about this. 20 years ago, think about the number of 25-pound cats that you actually saw in your practice. You didn't see them. They didn't exist. And fast forward to 2017, and 25-pound cats, that's kind of my normal obese cat patient. I'm seeing 32-pound cats, 34-pound cats, just extraordinary weights that I couldn't imagine. We're seeing Labrador retrievers that weigh 140 pounds. That's nearly double what they should weigh. So the reality is, it's not just the number, the total number, it's what does that number represent? And we're seeing further and further magnitude of obesity.
Wow. I mean, to me, that would seem almost obvious. A cat that big, and even a lab, Bolo is she's overweight, totally going to admit that, but nowhere near 140. I don't think she's obese. Yes.
Right. And Gila, the thing too for pet owners to understand, if you're listening this or watching this, it's that the risk factors, continue to magnify. I wouldn't say it's exponential, but a Labrador that weighs 120 pounds is at terrific risk of developing, joint problems, respiratory problems, kidney problems, high blood pressure, cancer. So it's much more than like the dog who needs to lose 5 pounds.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. So you kind of alluded to a way that we could determine, or a place where we could access a resource on how to identify what is the ideal weight for our pet, and is that standard? Because like for us, I have a particular, I weigh a certain amount, but I'm a certain height and whatever. Is that the same for dogs? Because Bolo's a smaller Labrador.
It's a real challenge. It's even a challenge for veterinary professionals who are, absorbed in this. Now, it's true after 25 years and 20 years really being immersed in obesity, I can, I've gotten a pretty good eye of spotting that. Even over the internet, I can look at your dog and start to see certain characteristics, but that's after watching and observing and examining literally thousands of dogs over a long career. But we lack that standardization. And as much as people want to sort of decry the body mass index or BMI for humans, it's still pretty darn accurate. It only really fails us for people that are very tall and very muscular and people that are very short. Okay, so the extremes. And I would argue that most of the tools we use in vet medicine also fail us for the tiny Chihuahua and the Great Dane. So, when we're trying to look at average, phenotypes or the morphology, the body shapes, we're going to have some issues at the edges. So we use something called the Body Condition Score, or BCS. And, we've argued back and forth over the past decade or so on the number scale. There's a 1 to 5, a 1 to 7, a 1 to 9. And this past year, and really over the past 2 years, the Association of Pet Obesity Prevention, the World Small Animal Veterinary Medical Association, the British Small Animal Veterinary Medical Association, all of those, we've sort of agreed that the 1 to 9 scale as a whole integer, which is a whole nother world of problems, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not 1.2, which I know sounds silly, but from a vet world. So 1 to 9 scale. So we can look at certain characteristics of your dog, make certain measurements, and actually come up with it. But honestly, I'm not satisfied at all. I'm actively working. I mean, the number of prototypes and beta, versions of products and technologies I see are tremendous that are trying to do one thing, and that is get an estimation of body fat for dogs. We have tried electrical impedance, we've tried different imaging technologies. I will tell you there's probably a couple of more elegant solutions coming that will maybe not be as accurate as I'd like, but yet I think we're in the next 5 years, we should have some technology that allows us to more accurately tell you if your dog has too much body fat, which is ultimately the only thing I am concerned with. People want to make this about a number on a scale. Do not make obesity about a number on a scale. It has to be about fat tissue, adipose tissue. The only harm in your weight is if you're carrying excess fat tissue, because that's the tissue that produces all of these potentially harmful compounds, chemicals, hormones. So I'm not worried. I mean, if you're a big Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's fine. I'm worried about the excess fat. So again, your vet's going to do something called a body condition score. It's really hard for most pet owners to do this at home accurately. We've done these little studies where we try to, we have a client do it, the pet owner do it, and then we have the vet do it, and we find a discordant result. So anyway, long-winded story, probably way too much information, but it's fascinating stuff. We need better technology. It's that simple. So if you're watching today and you're interested, hit me up.
Okay, and you know what? Let's also, Stephanie, if you're watching, put in the comments too, where people can reach out to Dr. Ward. The focusing on the body fat is key. I know that's in our household. That's always been the focus. Never really ever worried about the scale. But I want to go to the question of, so one has it. Okay, everybody might be able to see. So I can move over here. Bolo. Oh, she just laid down. I don't know if you guys can see her. She's a little chunky, I know. But here's what's interesting, and this is why I actually had Dr. Ward take a quick look at her. When you look at her waistline, from standing overhead, she looks like she has a decent waistline, which is how I was always taught at the vet to determine whether or not she was overweight. So I was thinking, well, I just don't understand. She seems overweight to me, but yet she looks, So just like people, dogs carry weights in different ways. And that's not necessarily the best way to determine. So that's the visual.
It's a good starting point. The visual interpretation is an excellent starting point. So the old hourglass, it does hold true. Where it fails you is when there's extra adipose or fat deposits around the hips. So then you get this nice hourglass, but it's an exaggerated hourglass. And for your dog, one of the things that struck me immediately was just the general lack of slope or upward slope of the abdomen. So she's got that kind of more barrel chest, and that indicates to me that she's carrying more belly fat or the abdominal adiposity, which quite frankly, that's the thing that my eye goes to immediately, and that's the most dangerous. So also the types of fat and where we carry our fat, both humans and dogs, cats are slightly different, but is also indicative. For example, brown fat that you hear a lot about, polar bears, animals that hibernate, they have lots of brown fat where they can store massive quantities of energy and then easily remove that energy out of that fat. So brown fat is good. And actually for humans, particularly women's, that's the fat you have around your hips. It's also the fat that we carry along our back and spine. So for dogs, when I see the hip fat, it's a concern potentially, but it's not my big worry. But it's the belly fat, the abdominal fat, that should worry you for humans and for dog owners in particular.
Okay, so here's a situation, and I know we also have, feel free to start popping in questions too, because I definitely will share them. I know there were some ones earlier about food, and I'll get back to those, but I want to share with you a couple comments here. So Mike Haas, who I know very well, in they're stationed in Hawaii now. But anyway, he is in charge of the security department there on the Navy base, and works. He has 21 military working dogs, and they chart their weight, their activity, and I think how often they also go to the bathroom. So I know that there's some strict structure there, and that they probably are not overweight. They're doing their job, serving our country, just like you are, Mike, and thank you for that. But I'm going to use my dog as an example, because here's a dog that leads a very, very active lifestyle. I mean, we are not sedentary. She is not eating and just laying around all day. This dog walks an hour in the morning with me. She hikes in the afternoon for another 45 minutes to an hour. She's running around throughout the day, and she only does get fed in her morning meal and her evening meal, actually less than the appropriate amount, because I've been a little concerned about her weight. Now, that is not to say that she does not find her way into things, as many of you who follow us know, Bolo's little adventures around food. But, we were talking earlier, so there are some other things that I should be looking into.
Yes. And this is one of the most frustrating things, because, I deal with lots of pet owners, and they are truly doing everything correctly. They are exercising, they are watching the treats, they've cut down carbs, and, they've kind of fed a better, higher protein diet. I mean, they're doing everything right, and yet their dog either gains weight or doesn't lose weight. And this is why it is so important that you have your dog carefully examined by your veterinarian before any weight loss program, because oftentimes there's a medical problem causing all of these issues. And so for me, when I see a dog like yours, which is a Labrador, a retriever, hypothyroid, low thyroid disease jumps out at me immediately. So, if you're watching or listening today and you're struggling with the weight, there's two things you need to know. A, rule out a medical condition. Thyroid's an easy one, but there are other conditions that can affect hormones. And so we want to make sure that we're actually looking at that. And I think the second thing is, do not continue to do the same thing over and over again. I get really frustrated where I'll see these referral clients, and they've been on whatever diet regimen they're on. Okay, so they can be home prepared meals, it can be a therapeutic diet from their vet. It doesn't make any difference, but their dog's not losing weight, and they've been doing this same thing for a year, and they're frustrated. I have what I call a 90-day rule. At 90 days, if we're not seeing the results that we're interested in, whether it's weight loss or increased activity or whatever, then we change something. You change the number of calories, the protein content, something you must change. Typically, we'll change entire diet lines. But just whatever you do, have medical problems ruled out, and then do not persist in the same thing, expecting the results to be different tomorrow for some reason.
Okay, great advice. And I think too, people need to remember you are your dog's advocate. So, for example, if your veterinarian does notice that your dog is overweight and is suggesting you to modify reduced food intake or increase exercise, what we all say is the obvious. Don't hesitate to ask, is there a deeper issue here? Because not all veterinarians are as savvy on this as you are, Dr. Ward. So I know even my vet just says, just watch your weight. But this is the first time, and I will definitely go take her in right away to check thyroid and other issues that could be affecting her long term.
So for someone like me who is, I am a proponent of treating obesity as a disease. We know it's multifactorial. I mean, it's just not as simple as exercise more and eat less. I mean, I wish it were that simple, but it's not. And so, there are many other things at play here, whether it's the gut bacteria, whether it's individual metabolism that may be affected by a disease, maybe there's hereditary factors that are influencing this. This is of all the conditions that I could have chosen to fight, I mean, this, I would argue, is the most complex, because
I can imagine.
There's so many factors that go into it. And then forget the dog, forget the cat, I've got to deal with the pet parent. So it's also maybe part of the problem. So it's incredibly complex. I will say this, though. The rewards are so astounding. So, when I kind of have those down days, I've got a Rolodex in my mind of those successful cases where we have truly transformed lives, both human and animal. And, that's sort of what you bank on, and it kind of gets you through the next day, because this is a frustrating condition to fight. And, obviously we all choose our paths in life, but there are many days when, wow, it's like we are at 0%, and you have to sort of have some energy reservoir to come back and say, but we did this great thing this one time.
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a whole, you guys can't see, but I have all these cards along my wall, or things that people have written. And when I have a down day too, you look at the places where you have made an impact, and that surely does help. So there are quite a few questions. I want to share some of them with you because they have some really good questions to ask. Julie has, I wanted to ask first. Yeah, Julie has a rescue dog. Her rescue dog does not like to walk as much as she would like. She's very scared of noises. And although they do walk her several times a day, they are concerned about her weight. Again, I'm going to imagine what your answer might be, but I'm let you address that.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, it is nearly impossible to walk your way to weight loss, both for humans and for dogs. I mean, the energy expenditure ratio, it just isn't in your favor. And dogs and humans, in fact, in my book, Chow Hounds, I go into great detail on this, but dogs and humans burn calories at about the same rate, per kilogram. So based on our size, we kind of have very similar, which is one of the reasons why I argue in my book that they're man's best friend and certain other species are not. But getting back to that walking your way, you really, weight loss, maintenance begins at the food bowl. And so you really need to examine critically the number of calories, the formulation, because you might be feeding a little higher higher carbohydrate diet than I would recommend or prefer. So you want to talk to your veterinarian. In general, I've always been, this is 20 plus years in, a fan of high protein, higher fiber, lower carbohydrates for dogs. I mean, this is one of the reasons why a lot of us, in my book, I go into great detail to give home prepared recipes, because
what's the name of your book?
My book is called Chow Hounds. I mean, it's getting a little old. The research still holds up, but I mean, you can buy it at Amazon. But the thing is just really examining the nutrition, because for me, this is a food bowl issue in most of these types of cases. So let's really dig down deeply. Let's find out what calories your dog does need, how many you're actually feeding, and then have that conversation with your veterinarian. Make sure it's not a medical condition and so forth.
So the correlation or the parallel to the way we should be eating is amazing to me.
Well, with dogs, cats, of course, they're obligate carnivores. So, it's all about the protein for cats. For dogs being more omnivorous, that means that, we can feed them vegetables and other carbohydrate sources as needed. But, the reality is, for weight loss in my world, we're really, I think that the evidence is pretty clear that higher protein, higher fiber diets tend to work better for most dogs. Having said that, if I have a dog that I'm on a high protein diet, high fiber diet, and we're not getting those results, we may just try a totally high fiber diet. Again, it's being flexible, being open-minded. I get very concerned with any one veterinary or otherwise who has the magic formula, this is the one thing and this is the thing, because it's just not that simple. Again, one of the things I always say in my lectures is it's not as simple as eating less and exercising more for humans or animals. I mean, if it were that simple, we would not be having this conversation.
Right. So one of the questions that popped up for me, and I'll read another one to you as well in just a moment, is if you've ruled out a medical problem and you're working on now a 90-day cycle to test, if you will, a shift in what is going on in the food bowl, the nutrition that's going on there, and you have a pet that's very overweight, what are you recommending in terms of exercise, and what should be the process to lead into that? Because just like us, you don't want to go out and try to run a marathon. You don't want to overdo it with them.
And Gila, this is such an important point, because this is why I say it's nearly impossible to walk your way to weight loss. And so I'm always going to emphasize the food bowl, if you will, as opposed to the exercise component, because my yield is so much greater. It's easy to cut 100 calories from a dog's diet. It's going to take you an hour to walk or more, depending on the situation, to burn those calories off. You exercise for other reasons. I mean, many of them are behavioral, they're immunological. I mean, there's so many benefits to exercising daily. But weight loss, again, is multifactorial. So when I have these cases and I want to ease them in, that's the key word. I'm going to ease them in. We may have some of these 120-pound Labradors who literally the goal is to get up, walk out to the end of their yard and walk back. So we may be starting out, can you do 100 yards? Can you do 50 yards without stopping? And then, you hope to work them up, but you must go very, very slowly, because that is where we see all these musculoskeletal injuries, including cruciate or knee ligament injuries, which are devastating, because when I now have that 120-pound lab who can no longer even get up, that becomes a real burden on the family. How do you even get them out to go potty? How do you take them to the veterinarian or whatever? I mean, it's very, very challenging. So I want to keep those joints intact as long as possible. That's why we focus on the food bowl.
Okay. So a lot of questions about food, and I want to throw them out there at you. One is, starting with a pup, is there a particular food? Is there a particular way? Is there something that they should be eating, or we should be looking at from the get-go? And then the other question is, do you have a recommendation of a particular brand? You may or may not want to recommend something, but is there something that you have your clients go to?
I think, my philosophy that I've written about exhaustively, is one to look at the individual. That's why I don't like the one size fits all, or, it's all about carbs, it's all about proteins, it's all about fiber or fat. It's just, you've got to make it work within that home environment. And within the individual, because some dogs respond really, really well to high protein, high fiber. Others actually seem to thrive on high carbohydrates. So, you got to be open-minded to this stuff. The physiology isn't completely worked out. There's still considerable work to be done. And so, we're still learning a lot about human physiology and animal physiology. But getting back to what do I look for? Overall, I'm going to make sure that I am trying to feed the calories to the current condition, activity levels, and so forth. So calorie content, the amount of calories, is really where you have to start, because without that in place, everything else falls apart. So then after we figure out the number of calories, then we start to say, what's our own personal philosophy? Do we want higher protein? Do we want higher fats? Do we want higher fiber, carbohydrates? What do we think about that? All of that sort of thing. And then we it kind of breaks out for two different categories of pet parents. And one is perfectly okay, or really needs a commercially available diet. So they don't have time to cook. They aren't interested maybe in cooking. It's just not going to happen. So then we try to find the best therapeutic diet for weight loss or for maintenance or whatever. And that kind of, when I go into the commercial vein, that sort of depends on what do you believe in your own personal philosophy. So if you shop at Whole Foods and like organic foods, then, there are going to be certain brands that really will, I think, resonate with you. If you want the least expensive diet, again, there may be another subset of diets that we could talk about. But that's the commercial. Then the other group of pet owners, they want to cook. They're cool with that. They will make meals, they'll freeze meals, they'll do whatever they want to do. And what I do personally is what I tell a lot of people, the easiest and best thing is what I've called for 20 years, the hybrid menu, where we say, okay, on those days when my kids have tennis or soccer and it's just too busy we're barely feeding ourselves, then I'm going to feed the best commercial diet I can for my dogs and cats. But on the weekends, and I typically try to store about 2 or 3 meals a week, we're going to feed them a home-prepared meal when we have time. So that hybridization really makes it a lot easier for most pet owners, because you don't have to worry as much about micro and macronutrient, what if you're getting the formulation right, because the commercial component, especially if you're feeding that 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, that takes care of all those little essential vitamins and minerals that you might be missing. And the other thing is, I really like feeding whole foods to my pets whenever possible. And, I would say now that has become a much more popular attitude amongst veterinarians than it was 20 years ago. So simply supplementing some real fresh vegetables in your dog's food can have tremendous health benefits. So, you'll hear people like me and others talk about that a lot.
No, it's great. Another question that's come up is, well, there's two that have come up. One is about raw food. Should people, is that a resource for nutrition and weight management, if you will? And then the other question is there, and I know you've kind of been addressing this throughout, but some people are popping in at different times. Is there a particular breed-specific strategy? For example, like with pugs, with the difficulty in walking, and is there a breed that you see is more prevalent being overweight?
Right. Yeah. First of all, and I'll briefly address it because I mean it can devolve. If you want to start a bar fight, you just talk about raw feeding of dogs and cats.
So true.
And the truth is, there's really no clear evidence that raw provides any additional benefit or does not. So, I'm a bit agnostic on it. I am not convinced by some of the arguments that are made. I like whole foods. I like fresh foods. I think that the cooking, since we've co-evolved with dogs for 30 to 50,000 years, many of the same systems that we have adapted to, dogs appear to as well. There's some really fascinating research from a Hungarian colleague of mine around this very topic. But so again, I don't see a magical component to raw that makes it better than giving them real fresh foods from that you've cooked. So again, I like that people are interested. I really encourage people to continue to explore this. But for me, I'm going to I do slow cooking at very low heat for long periods of time. And, lots of people do this. And this is actually one of the ways I teach vets. But getting back to the breeds, which is, I think, a more, important talk is, yes, we do see certain breeds that have a higher prevalence of obesity. And they're the breeds that you would expect. I mean, Labrador retrievers. And I think they have we've bred them to have a high food drive. So they're reward oriented. You want a lab to do something, you just offer them a treat and they will go to Alaska and back, So food drive is a component there that's hereditary. We see breeds like bulldogs, and any of the little pugs types of dogs, Dachshunds, Chihuahuas. We're seeing a preponderance of obesity there. So, and even Yorkshire Terriers. So a lot of the dogs that are kind of cradled and walk around, with their owners a lot, they aren't getting the physical activity, and they're typically getting a lot of food rewards as well. Beagles always pop up on our numbers. Every year, beagles tend to be at the top of that. And one of the things that concerns me when I see beagles is the role of hypothyroidism, because beagles do have a hereditary issue with thyroid disease. I do believe, though, in what one of the question was about a breed specific, that's one of the things I really implore veterinarians to do. And that is to look at the nutritional and activity requirements of a Labrador as opposed to a Chihuahua, because they're going to be very different strategies for the most part. So, if you have a particular breed, and even if it's just a rescue mutt, like many of us have, but it's sort of more lab or more shepherd or more, whatever, sort of take that main thing and say, let's make sure that we adapt it. But ultimately, it's what's, as we always say in the vet nutrition world, you feed to lean mass. I mean, what you want to do is make sure that you are feeding and having activity levels that support lean, healthy muscle mass, bottom line.
So and I'm sure it's a delicate subject when people are into your practice with pets who have weight issues, if the individual themselves are also overweight, do you ever suggest a kind of a strategy for both of them as a way to help them shift their lifestyle and make it more enjoyable for both of them?
Right. And you can, if you follow my path, I actually was doing more for human weight loss, whether it was personal training or coaching, before, or at the same time when I was really starting to get immersed in the pet obesity, because that existed before, sort of this awareness of pet obesity. And, again, if you go back and look in the veterinary literature prior to 2005, and really it wasn't until around 2010, so 5 full years of us just hammering this message out there to the vet world, that pet obesity suddenly peaks on the radar. So around 2010, I think I finally tipped the direction of the vet profession to say, we need to take this seriously. But getting back to, if I'm saying to pet owners, where is it a human problem? Is it a pet problem? I have to say it's both. as you become more experienced veterinarian, you will be able to maybe offer some advice, but I am not there to ever insert myself in the human weight loss equation. I do have other credentials outside, but in the veterinary clinic, you should feel, if you take your pet there, that it's all about the pet 100%. And I want to keep those divisions very, very clear in my practice. It is true. Many people come to me and then say, okay, so Dr. Ward, if I'm doing this for my dog, do you have any suggestions for me? And typically it's going to be, well, you need to talk to your own healthcare provider, and
Right.
maybe work with a trainer. So, but keep the divisions distinct.
That I could imagine you would need to. In your book, the question is that being asked, do you have recipes in there, like for the slow cooked meals that you do for your dog?
Yes, we do. We offer, I give you some of my favorite recipes that we give with clients, and some of them are well balanced and complete, and others are just partial to use this hybrid type of theory. Oh yes, we've got lots, and I'll tell you where I really focused in that book was on treats, because that's the area, that's the spot that kind of gets most people, because we love to share food with our pets, and so if I could do one thing, it would be to completely transform the treat industry, because right now most of those are what I call junk food treats, kibble crack, because I know that they're not giving me any nutritional value. They give us this instant reward. It's no different than you eating a sugary drink or a bowl of ice cream or whatever. You get that instant high, that hit, and then you crash. And so I really try to, for me, it's all about maintaining, I want to keep insulin levels moderated. I want to avoid big glycemic or blood sugar surges, because there's a lot of evidence to support that that's really where most of our health problems start. So dogs, cats are slightly different. The physiology is different, but dogs and humans, we really want to keep those blood sugar levels from swinging high and low.
Yeah, totally agree. And also with treats in terms of training, people who do that, because I do that myself, will provide some rewards for different things in training. But the conversation is always around what the overall caloric intake is for the day. And that just like for us, adding stuff in on top of what you already are taking in, and also looking at what a treat is, because one little treat that's delivered commercially, in the package, literally can be broken down into as many as 10 opportunities for reward.
Right.
So limiting
that. Like I say in my book, dogs don't do division. So break those treats up into two different pieces. It doesn't make any difference, because the reward mechanism is what counts. And this is why, and Gila, you are a very accomplished dog trainer as well. And, I'm certainly someone who animal behavior is a big part of what I do. What people have to do is get off the food rewards quickly. So when you're training that new puppy, it's really important that as they learn those new skills and tasks, that you quickly move off of food lures and back to praise. You've got to, because so many times, I giggle, and I'm sure you do too, but you have the 10-year-old Maltipoo that comes into your clinic and the owner still gives them a treat to go potty. It's like, I think they got the potty training thing down about 10 years ago. Let's skip the food.
Exactly. Yeah, no, there definitely is a cutoff time. It's really a learning tool or teaching tool. And then, you need to incorporate what is real life reward for them. Let me see. What other questions do you guys have out there for Dr. Ward? I'm going to scroll through some of these. This is interesting. There's one about, if your dog is too thin.
Too thin. And you're right. I mean, believe it or not, that's something that we actually spend quite a bit of time on, because if you think about what we do, which is to try to help animals lose weight, we have to know when to stop losing weight. When do we get into the danger? So we actually look quite closely at the opposite end of the spectrum as well. In general, if your dog is too thin, it's one of two major possibilities: inadequate caloric intakes, they're not feeding enough to keep up with their activity or energy expenditures, or disease state. And I do get very concerned when I see very cachectic or emaciated looking dogs and cats, because that usually signals to me I need to be on the hunt for a disease. But then again, there are some dogs, like I have a friend who is an ultra marathoner, and her dogs are whippet thin, and they are not whippets, and they're in great shape. But again, based on their lifestyle, they're fine. And the key thing there is, like I said earlier, we feed to maintain lean mass. And so that's what this person does. I mean, she keeps her dogs, and honestly, they vary a kilogram at most.
All right, guys, we're going to get ready to wrap it up. So if you're going to ask any questions, this would be the time. I think to highlight just a few key points that you've brought up throughout our conversation is, obviously the detrimental effects to immediate and long-term health for our pets if they are obese. You mentioned a resource by which we could determine, the ideal weights or proposed. Could you mention that again so we can put that in the comments?
Yeah, I think, certainly. If you just go visit petobesityprevention.org, you scroll around, there's tools, there's all kind of weight loss charts and things like that. There's a pretty good, decent amount of resources there.
Okay, great, because that is a great place to go. Second thing is that we should be looking in terms of an initial plan and to patiently evaluate that over the course of 90 days and then course correct where we're not seeing the appropriate changes that we're looking for. Okay.
Very important.
And then thirdly is if you feel, as I have done, kind of like at a loss, my dog is eating the right amount of food. She doesn't get treats from me per se. I'm not going to say like she does. She'll find her own somehow, somewhere in the trash, in my office. Not my office, but other people's offices. But nonetheless, somewhere she's probably getting a little extra calories. But she exercises plenty, so that there is something else going on there, or there's possibly something else going on, and that taking your dog or your cat to the vet if you're not seeing the changes that you need to see. Also, another point was that while exercise is critically important to overall health and well-being, it is not the sole answer nor the first step answer to trying to start a weight loss program. But we need to look at the nutrition first and then dive into what the activity plan is going to be, keeping in mind that for overweight or very obese pets, this needs to be done in a very progressive progressive manner, starting, really easing in, so to protect the joints and the ligaments and everything that are weight bearing, so that they don't get injured. Let's see. Did I miss anything? Is there any other parting key point that we definitely need as a takeaway?
No, I mean, this is an important battle that we all have to fight. And there's two areas that we need to continue to target on. That is childhood obesity and, of course, I think pet obesity, because they're very similar in their etiology or cause and contributing factors. So, for me, it's all about the next generation. What are we doing as a society to help keep our children healthy so that they don't have the diabetes, the crippling, arthritis, the hypertension, the heart disease, all that stuff that we've seen in previous generations. And for pets as well, I think my battle really can be won or lost with every new puppy and every new kitten that is seen in veterinary clinics all across the world. So, it's always about the future. If you're dealing with a problem today, get professional help, because you can A, waste time and money, and B, not get the results you want that's cause more damage. And then finally, if you do get a new puppy or kitten, don't repeat those same old mistakes. And we've learned a lot. Just simply adding some whole fresh foods to the diet can make a huge difference if you must feed a commercial diet. So, we're learning, we're getting better. And the reality is, even as sometimes when I do have those strikeout days where no patients seem to be doing the way I'd like for them to do, you sit back and you go, you know what, this is a long game. We're in it for the long haul. And this is really about the future.
Yes, and the other thing, I just have another quick question, and then somebody did pop in something. I don't know if I'll have time to answer that, but I know that research is showing the human lifespan is increasing. So we are putting some time, extending the time of life, if you will, for us. Do you think that's possible? Is that happening currently with the pets? Do we expect our pets to live longer than they have in the past?
Well, you may want to check out an initiative that I began in 2015. It's project25.vet. So go to the website, project25.vet. And I've asked that exact question. And A, we don't have clear evidence to answer that. So I am seeking ways to get that answer. B, I think it's time that we had a very credible scientific medical conversation around why aren't dogs and cats living longer. And if you want to know why I called it Project 25, there were two goals in mind. One was to extend the life expectancy of dogs and cats 25% by the year 2025. So that was the first part. And the second and ultimate goal for me is to have the average life expectancy of dogs and cats to be 25. Now, when I say this, at conferences, sometimes people, it splits the room like an atom bomb. But the reality is, as a society, as human beings, why aren't we asking those questions? We're certainly asking and answering them for humans. So I think it's a natural progression that we should be asking for our pets. So again, check out project25.vet. And if you're in any of those sectors that we're looking for, hit me up.
That is awesome. Do you know Peter Diamandis?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and
you guys,
Steve Kotler, his co-author, is a very good personal friend.
Oh, okay, cool. Because I'm like, man, you guys need to rub in tennis. You're all talking the same language. I would give anything, as I know all of our viewers would, if our dogs and cats could live at least 25 years with us. That would be a gift.
Well, it starts by keeping them in a lean mass. We know from studies that is the one thing you can do to extend longevity and enhance quality of life. It's that simple. Stay as lean as possible, which is, again, Gila, you're a great example. You live this very healthy, wholesome lifestyle. You've been very physically active your entire life, I'm guessing. And, it's important. So
somebody's asking about a show, My Big Fat Makeover. I've never heard of the show, but then again, I don't watch TV. So it says it's an angle more about what the pet parent can do rather than seeing a vet. I'm wondering, is this a show that's about pets overweight and they're publicly trying to have them lose weight? I don't know, but have you heard of it?
Yes, I have. I don't even think veterinarians are involved with it. I think we want to be careful as a society and not make this a spectacle. I think there's a lot of judgment and bias, and I think we have to be careful of even the word. Even the F word, that's a very judgmental term, and it should be avoided at all costs because, again, they didn't make this choice. This is a disease that happened to them. And so I try to stay away from things that try to sensationalize and make a spectacle of what's really a heart-wrenching, heartbreaking situation. And to do that for TV might be the wrong thing.
So you guys got it there. Lots of great takeaways, Dr. Ward. I am so grateful for the chance to have you on our live show and to share that information with our viewers. I know there'll probably be a lot of replay watchers, so please do share with your friends. I want to remind everybody that you can enter to win the great prize of the dog water bottle, Never Walk Alone, and the Never Walk Alone hooded t-shirt from Dog is Good. You can enter to win, and that'll be announced in our our private Facebook group, the Dog is Good Lifestyle group. So you can go there, and that is the place to be for all new information and fun stuff. And I want you guys to connect with each other in there. We have some fun. We're going to be doing some more fun things in the future. But again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the knowledge and that you share, and this is a really important topic, and I am going on a mission to help Bolo get leaner so that she can hopefully stay a really long time with our family. All right, guys, we are out.